it's me again. It has been so long since you and I have sat down and had a conversation. And yet, here we are, again, you and me. I apologize because it's been so long, but things happen. Number one, well, as you know, Muse, I was in a show, and that show went very well, and I had to dedicate a lot of creative energy to getting that show up and running because it was my first one in 10 years. And then, after that, I had to put energy into a callback for another show, and then I wound up with bronchitis. Yeah, I'm still getting over the bronchitis. And I had to, actually, I had bronchitis last week, and knowing that I had to perform at a festival, I guess you'd call it a festival. And on the Tuesday of that week, I couldn't even speak, let alone sing. And fortunately, I went to the doctor, and the doctor gave me an antibiotic, took care of it, and I sang, and everything was great. And then ever since then, for the last few weeks, I've been proofreading POTUS. So I've been putting a lot of energy on getting POTUS ready. And here I am, back with you, and I have a really interesting topic to talk about with you, Muse. It's one that's kind of always been in the back of my mind, but lately it was thrust to the fore. And I'll tell you why, Muse. Now, you know that the show that I auditioned for, that I was cast in, and I got cast in a role that I've been wanting to play for decades. The show is Cabaret, and the role is the MC. And yes, I have been wanting to play that role for a very long time, and I'm excited beyond words that I'm going to get to play this role. While at the same time, I'm really nervous about it. And why am I nervous about it is the reason I want to talk to you today. And that is definitive works. It's not a subject that you hear a lot of artists talking about. And I want to broach it with you today because I think it's important. I think it's something that artists must think about, at the very least. Artists need to think about definitive works. And the reason why that this has come barreling into my focus is because there was a person who performed the role of MC, completely redefining what that role was. And it became definitive for them. It became definitive for that role. And everyone that has performed that role since has performed it with a nod to that person. And that person is Alan Cumming. And his performance of the MC completely, utterly, and profoundly redefined that role. Prior to that, everybody considered Joel Grey to be the definitive performance for the role. After Alan Cumming took it, unfortunately, Joel Grey kind of took a back seat. And now that I am faced with having to perform this role, it's daunting because everybody that comes to see this show, they come to see that character and they expect to see some version of Alan Cumming. And as an actor, I place the burden on myself to go beyond that. I'm not saying that anybody will ever redefine what Alan Cumming did. I don't know that anybody could ever perform that role better than he did. But I have to approach this in such a way that I do not ignore what Cumming did, while at the same time I do not ignore what I can bring to the table. And in this instance, it is an incredibly difficult task, because if you haven't, I highly recommend you go to YouTube and you take a look at some of the scenes that he did. He's remarkable what he did to that role. But I'm not nervous about it. I know that I will approach this in a unique way that is inspired by Cumming. But at the same time, I have to make sure that I kind of split that difference, that I give the audience what they expect, and I also, at the same time, give the audience what they don't expect. And that's the challenge, melding those two together. Now, the same thing goes with all artistic works. As a writer, I am faced on a daily basis with definitive works. Now, this goes for definitive works of writers, definitive works of genres, everything. If I, like, for instance, let's think about let's talk about books that center around hell or demons. For me, the definitive work in that genre would be The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. Or the City of Angels, or the Infernal Angel trilogy, I can't remember what it's called, but the City of Angels, I can't remember what they're called, Infernal Angel, City of Angels, and there's another one in there by Edward Lee. That series and that book, the series by Lee and the book by Barker, are pretty definitive. And of course, for me, Barker is a definitive author for the horror genre. And I knew, for example, when I wrote Hell's Muse that the footsteps in which I were walking in were great. And I had to deal with that subject in such a way as to not ignore the definitive works before me, and yet not ignore what I can bring to them. And I think that it is crucial for us as artists to understand and know what the definitive works are within the same medium, the same genre that we work in. Because I believe that those that consume the art, readers, audience members, listeners, I believe that they understand that there are definitive works, and they don't want to see them in your work, but they want to know that they exist, I think. Maybe I'm giving too much credit to people, but it's like right now, over the last 8 or so years, people that love the zombie genre expect in some way for everything zombie to, in some way or shape or form, to have been flavored by The Walking Dead. Now, of course, there are many of us who shy away from that, simply because we don't want to seem as though we're riding on the coattails of something famous. But there are people out there are people that are huge fans of The Walking Dead that want to read. They know that The Walking Dead is going to be a finite product, and at some point it's going to end, or it is going to have jumped the shark for them, and they're not going to enjoy it as much as they did. And they're going to look at other mediums. They're going to look at other television shows, at movies, at books, and say, please fulfill my Walking Dead need. Can you do that? And as a writer, you can choose to say, I can fulfill that need for you. And you can read this particular book series of mine, and it will appease you. It will give you what you're missing now from whatever it was that you loved from The Walking Dead. And the same thing goes for just about anything that you listen to. It's like music. Rush is no longer touring, and who knows if they're going to be recording any music. So it is, if I want to hear new music like Rush, I have to find other bands that sound like Rush. Same thing holds true with classical music. Are there modern composers that will give me that will feed my craving for Mozart? Probably not. That's a bad example because Mozart is Mozart. But I think it is important for us to understand that as creators. And when I head into the rehearsals of cabaret, I do so with an understanding that I want to have some flavor of Alan Cumming in my performance. And that's it's kind of built into the remount of Cabaret that was done in '98, and I know that the director is looking for that, so I have to tackle that role, but at the same time I have to go, okay, this is what Alan did that I can use, but this is what I'm going to add to it, and I'm going to mix all this stuff together, and I'm going to create this lovely, wonderful, multi-dimensional dish that people can yum, 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 eat with their eyes and their ears. And I like to think that is also very possible with literature as well. For me, I was kind of weaned on Barker, and I like to think that his inspiration is woven within the fabric of my work. I'm not saying that I'm as good as him. That's foolish. But I can't get you. I think as artists, we cannot get around the idea that out there, someone created the definitive work for the genre. The best, the pinnacle. And we as artists have to strive to usurp that as the definitive work. It would be beyond belief if someone were to come to our production of Cabaret and say, you have redefined what that role is. You are now the definitive actor for that. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm going to do my best to make it happen. Just like every time I write a book, I try to write it with the idea that that book is going to at some point become a definitive work, either of mine or of a genre. It would be great if POTUS came out and somebody or people looked at that and said, this is the definitive political satire book. This redefines what the community believes is political satire. Who knows? But I just think that as artists, it is crucial for us to always have an eye out for that and know who for us as individuals, as artists, as consumers, who it is that create those definitive works. Because without knowing that, and this, it's a very personal thing. You can't, I don't think it's possible to say that collectively we all would say X wrote the definitive book of Y. Because someone out there is going to say, no, I think Z wrote the definitive book of Y. Because taste is subjective. But as artists, we need to know individually, and readers need to know individually who it is or what it is that definitive work would be. Because it reshapes our thinking. So the next time you think about sitting down to write something or sitting down to read something, pause for a moment and say, what is the definitive work in this genre for me? What book truly inspires me the most in this genre? Or what actor truly inspires me the most in this role? When you can answer that question, I think then you can better set your sights on a goal, and you can also have a better idea of how you want to approach the work. You can say, X is the best. And from X, I want to pick and choose 1, 2, and 3. I'm not saying copy. We do not steal. We do not pirate and plagiarize. But from Clive Barker, do I want to try to represent or emulate his grace in his words? It's as simple as that. Do I want to write the horrific with such eloquence, if I can, if it's possible, as him? It's not like, I'm not saying I'm going to write a book about hell and there's going to be a priest of hell with pins in his head. That's just theft. That's not what I'm talking about. Don't steal. Anyway, that's what I wanted to talk with you about, Muse. And I know it's not game changing or deal breaking or making, but I think it's something that every artist needs to stop and think about. And allow the thought of that, allow the answers to those questions to help shape your own work and your own voice. I think probably subconsciously we do this anyway. And I think it's a great exercise to do it consciously. Maybe? I don't know. But hey, guess what? You and I are talking again, and that's important to me. Because I've missed you, Muse. I haven't really, I've missed talking to you. I've known you've been there the whole time, because I don't think I would have survived without you there in the background, tapping me on the shoulder going, hey, excuse me, I have an idea that you need to consider. Because you've been doing that an awful lot lately. It's like I can't turn my head without my Muse going, I have this idea, and I think it's perfect for you. And to that, Muse, I thank you, and guess what? You are awesome.